In this series, we're talking about being a world changer, and this message today emphasizes that of understanding the cost. There's no doubt, according to Scripture, that salvation is completely free. But the life of a Christian who's dedicated to Christ, I'm talking about a true disciple and follower of Christ, that person is going to face the difficulties that come along with it. And the admission of this fact should in no way diminish our pleasure in following the Lord. However, we need to understand that this pathway can carry a price. It makes our question a very sobering one. Do you really want to be a world changer? Do you want to make a difference in the world and in the lives of others? Now, to make the difference that's needed, there is a price to pay. In fact, Jesus spoke about this specifically. And we're going to look at what he himself said was the price of discipleship. So you cannot make a difference unless you know the Lord as your Savior, and the resulting life that follows is one that follows the characterization that's given by Christ. So Jesus defines for us the cost of discipleship, that is the cost of being a Christian, which is the cost of a life that's going to make a difference in this world. If you're going to make a difference, first of all, you have to love the Lord above all else. Luke chapter 14, verse 26, Jesus says, "If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple." There is nothing more basic to Christian living than this first of all principles and laws, because it speaks of a life that's given over to Christ. This is stated back in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy chapter 5, beginning at verse 7. "Thou shalt have none other gods before me. Thou shalt not make thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that's in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments." In fact, when we go to the New Testament, Jesus was asked about all this, and he makes this statement concerning the great commandment according to himself, when he said in Matthew 22, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment." Now, as we come back to our passage of Luke 14:26, what Jesus includes there are all the different things that are most precious to man. And he's not telling us actually to hate these things, but that our love for these has to take its proper place as it pertains to our love for him. Now, this is Jesus' use of a figure of speech that's known as hyperbole. Now, hyperbole is a conscious exaggeration that expresses truth in a non-literal manner. In other words, our comparative love then between God and these are as vast apart as love is to hate. A positive example of this same expression is found in Matthew chapter 10, verse 37. It's where Jesus says that if any man love mother or father more than me, he's not worthy of me. Now, we usually think of putting our recipients of love on a list of importance and priority, and we'll put God at the top of the list. Jesus, in a very extremely exaggerated way, is vividly pointing out that for the disciple and the follower of Jesus, there is no top 10 list. There's only one on the list, and that's God. You know, I've heard people who have said that they love the Lord supremely. They can shed a tear. They have a passionate heart by all appearances, yet they don't have the action to support it. The love of discipleship is a love of commitment. And if you're committed to something, or especially to someone, then this commitment reveals itself in actions that reveal that commitment. Let's take as an example a husband that says that he loves his wife. Well, with that statement would come the expectation from the wife that he's also going to show it. Yet maybe the husband would spend all of his free time with his buddies. He spends his money on himself and on seemingly selfish personal pursuits. He never remembers his wife's birthday, and even worse, he won't remember their anniversary. Never takes any personal family time. Yet he comes by and he says to his wife, Or he says to others, my wife is the greatest love of my life. Listen, if there's love there, there's interest and there's commitment there. It proves itself by actions. Now, folks, I ask you, are there any of us who would fall for that kind of a statement from a husband that would make that statement about his wife? I said, no, we can see through that. And by the way, his wife would see through it as well. Yet we don't see through it when it comes to our saying that we love the Lord above all else. The statement to be of value and substance has to be backed up practically with actions that reveal that commitment. So we go on to say, I love the Lord above all else. Well, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Our actions must verify the words. Our love must exemplify the truth of what has been given to us. Folks, I'm saying simply this. Love is backed up by commitment and then action. Discipleship is a relationship with Christ based on love and revealed by commitment to what He loves. And the difference we hope to make in this world can only take place if our love and dedication to the Lord is supreme above everything else. If we don't love the Lord above all else, then anything else will find prominence and preeminence, and all hope of making a difference is going to be lost. You say, well, Brother Barnes, that's really asking so much. Well, let's look at Luke chapter 14, verse 33 that says, so likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. Now here we see, secondly, that we must forsake all for Christ. If we're going to make a difference in the world, all must be forsaken. So, how far should we take that? Well, as we've all heard, all means all. And that's all that all means. In other words, we have to count the cost and pay the required price. Now, you would think that the requirement of love would be enough, the comparison severe enough to drive home his point. But then he drives home the blow that in order to be a disciple, this world changer, this person who could, like our disciples of the New Testament, turn the world upside down, you've got to relinquish everything that you have. We might say, okay, I'm willing to do it. Okay, well, the question is not, are you willing? The question is, have you? We confidently say to others, well, I will give all to the Lord if He required it. The thing is, if you're a world changer, if you're a disciple of Christ, He's already required it. There is not one square inch of this entire universe, this creation that God has made, about which Jesus doesn't look at and cry out, this is mine, this belongs to me. And so the point is, how can one be a follower of Christ if that follower has not relinquished all that may keep him from following? In other words, we don't need to be carrying around baggage when we follow Jesus. You think about it, James and John left their nets. Matthew left the receipt of custom. Paul left the security of Phariseeism. Elisha left the oxen and the yoke. You remember the rich young ruler went away saddened because he would not give everything. Nathan Schaefer made this statement, which I think is very interesting. You know, at the very close of life, it's not going to be how much have you gotten, but how much have you given. It's not how much you have won, but how much have you done. Not how much have you saved, but how much have you sacrificed. It'll be how much you have loved and served, not how much you were honored. You know, we've all learned that many things are easier to say than to do them. And I think such is the case here. We say and we hear people around us say, Lord, I forsake everything for you. But then you'll look at the lives that we lead, and so much is still hidden away from Christ, areas that we would not let Him touch in our lives. We've convinced ourselves somehow that what we have is ours, and God understands that we simply can't relinquish everything. Listen, for the Christian life, it's all about Jesus. It's not about us. And if we're going to be an influence for changing the world, then we must understand that our dedication for anything else than the Lord is a life dedicated to the world and dedicated to self. Say, but preacher, that's so hard to do, to love God above everything else that I count dear, and to forsake all that I've labored for. I don't know that I can bear up under that load. All right, we're going to look now at Luke chapter 14 and verse 27, where Jesus tells us that we also must bear our cross. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Jesus says, for this person to be a disciple, for one to be a disciple, someone who will go into the world and make a difference, you've got to bear your cross. And of course, this speaks of self-denial. Now, you don't have to love the Lord and forsake everything. God will let you do as you wish. Eternity might hang in the balance. And you won't be available to make any true spiritual difference when that takes place. You don't have to do it. You see, bearing a cross is voluntarily doing something for Jesus that you don't have to do. But bearing a cross to the first century person meant death, a death to self, a death to everything. And just as Jesus bore his cross for you and me voluntarily, in that your eternity was hanging in the balances, but he did that for you voluntarily and for me anyway. He died for us. Jesus took up his cross and did something that he didn't have to do. He died to himself in order to gain you. And what Jesus is saying now to you and to me, are you willing to voluntarily bear your cross of discipleship for me? He wants us to do the same for him. He wants us to bear our cross of discipleship in order to be of help to him. Sure, it's hard. It's difficult. But a cross always is. Think about this. A friend is someone who will go out of his way, even hazard himself for the one that he loves or for the one that he is caring for. Now, why does he do that? Because he's a friend. If you need something, a friend will let you have it. No charge, no rent, because he's your friend. He does something he doesn't have to do because he's a friend. Remember, Jesus said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. See, this is death to self for the benefit of another. And this kind of friendship doesn't have to, but because it's true friendship, it goes to such lengths as that. A disciple is the truest kind of a friend. He bears what he doesn't have to. And why does he do that? Because of discipleship. Because of the commitment that came with the relationship, he goes to the furthest extreme for his friend. You see, world changers understand that there's a price for such a life as this. By the way, the apostles and those of the early church, they paid a great price. Listen to these examples of how different ones in our scriptures died, and in the following manner. It's reported that Matthew suffered martyrdom by being slain with a sword in Ethiopia. Mark died in Alexandria after being dragged through the streets. Luke was hanged on an olive tree in Greece. John was put in a cauldron of boiling oil, but escaped death and was afterwards banished to Patmos. Peter was crucified at Rome with his head downward. James the Greater was beheaded at Jerusalem. James the Less was thrown from a pinnacle of the temple and then beaten to death. Bartholomew was flayed alive. Andrew was bound to a cross where he preached until he died. Thomas was pierced through with a lance in the East Indies. Jude was shot to death with arrows. Matthias was first stoned and then beheaded. Barnabas was stoned to death, and then Paul was beheaded at Rome by the Emperor Nero. Folks, discipleship, cross-bearing, is the greatest representation practically in revealing ourselves as Christ's friend, and that we are associated with him in cross-bearing. Are you Christ's friend? Well, that might be answered in the question, are you Christ's disciple? And that might be answered by the question, are you taking up your cross for him? Have you done it? This life of making a difference could also be summed up perhaps in a quote from Martin Luther when he said, "A religion that gives nothing, costs nothing, and suffers nothing is worth nothing." You see, a world changer is one who gives everything, whose discipleship costs everything, one who could suffer anything, but whose effectiveness for the cause of Christ is worth everything in the realm where it needs to be effective. Are you and do you want to make a difference in the world? If so, it comes with a price. May God help and encourage us not only to understand what expected, but also to further commit ourselves to that life which will change the world.